Welcome into episode number 14 of the Audio Barnyard podcast. With Don Barnes, I'm Donnie Barnes. We are brought to you, as always, of course, by VOJumpstart.com, where we teach you how to dramatically cut your production time and increase your audio quality. Today, we're talking about a little controversy that erupted in one of the Facebook groups we're in. We're both in a number of different audio-related Facebook groups, and there was one in particular the other day where somebody posted a thread that generated a lot of heat, you could say, a lot of passionate responses on either side. And so we're going to take a look at it and address it a bit today. So this poster in this particular group said the following, quote, "I don't know who needs to hear this, but we don't get paid for our methods. We don't get paid for our experience. We don't get paid for which DAW we use. We don't get paid to punch and roll or to use a clicker. We don't get paid for our number of coaches. We don't get paid for our equipment or for our whisper room or our homemade blanket fort. We don't get paid for the number of awards we have. We get paid for our results. So deliver the results that you're getting paid for. Get paid for the results that you are delivering," end quote. And this generated many different comments and other things. So it's interesting because on one hand, I can see what this person was trying to get at, which is people don't like elitism or snobbery, right? They don't like it when certain people, especially people with experience and credentials and accomplishments and track records, act like they're superior to other people. They don't like it when people who advocate one particular method, this goes for any venture, not just audio recording. They don't like it when people who do things a certain way look down on people who do things a different way or have a different opinion, right? So I think that's something, Don, that you and I totally understand. We both dislike snobbery too. On the other hand, to say that you don't get paid for your methods, you just get paid for your results, that's not really the whole story, is it?
I do think it changes over the lifetime of your career, where you start off being like, I'm going to do it my way. And I, as a young musician, man, I was a rebel. I just thought, I'm going to be unique. I'm going to be special, and I'm going to do it my way. And that is going to be a path to victory, a path to success. And the strange thing is, as I matured as a musician, I learned that, you know what? If you actually stand on the shoulders of the masters, if you learn to try to sound exactly like them, if you repeat the behaviors and the techniques that they used, and you actually try to imitate them, man, if you do that and then branch out after that, you get so much further. I wish I had done more copying. In other words, more listening to the experienced voices when I was younger. Now, that said, there's so many paths to success. But the problem that people who are more mature in this business come up against is you give a good piece of advice based on experience. So if you're a parent of 5 kids, what happens is over time you learn a thing or two about those set of kids. You don't know everything about all kids, but you do see some trends. You do see what works. You also see a whole boatload of stuff that when firstborn was a little guy, Donnie, you were trying to do a bunch of things, and then he's later going, well, you let his little sister do this and this and this and this, and you never let me do that. I know. Well, we learned a bunch of stuff. So you get caught up with this. I appreciate the rebels. I appreciate the people that want to go their own path. There's nothing wrong with that. What does happen as a more mature person or somebody with more maturity in the business is sometimes you see a bunch of people who have failed, and that's not too harsh of a word probably, who've gone and done something else because they did their own thing. And while that, it seemed fine to them, sometimes we offer some advice and we end up with them going, oh, I don't like that advice. I want to do it my own way. And that, it works some of the time. And sometimes it's actually the opposite.
Yeah, and I think it's incumbent on both those who have been in the business a while and have that experience that you mentioned, and also those that are newer or just getting started or are early in their journey. I think it's incumbent on both ends of that spectrum to approach every issue with a bit of humility and kindness, right? To where we're not demeaning or belittling others, or we're not completely disrespecting others as well. And either end of that spectrum, respect and tact and approaching things with the right attitude is really key, isn't it?
Absolutely. And then add on top of that, messaging and writing it can be very, very harsh, which is why we do these video podcasts, because I can say the same thing in writing and it comes across as, wow, what a rear end. He just told me X. Well, maybe I was in a hurry and, we're all busy. And sometimes I write something, I look back at it later, sometimes the same day, sometimes a half hour later, sometimes 2 days later, I see something, I think, whoa, that was not really what I intended to say. But I read it and I'm like, oh, terrible. That was a little too harsh. It wasn't intended that way. So we compound the problem with social media being something where I quickly reply to something because I'm on to something else. And sometimes I don't do a great job. And what you said a little bit earlier about maybe having some grace as well toward, or just, you know what, if I say something poorly and I have, guilty, and you call me out on it nicely, half the time I'll go back and rewrite those sentences and try to make them nicer, maybe more than that. And anybody looks at my post, go look at how many times I have edited after my little post, because what you're going to see is I read it later and sometimes I think, ooh, that came across as too harsh or not. So we kind of have both dynamics playing off where I'm an adult. Don't you dare tell me what to do. That's half my mentality, okay? And then also I'm an adult, but in this area, I'm learning something. So then I have to go, well, okay, Donnie didn't mean to say, maybe how Donnie wrote it, it might have come across harsher than he intended. And once we have a dialogue, then he writes, yeah. What I really meant was this. And hopefully he goes back and amends the first one.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, I know you've talked on other podcasts, I think, and in other forums about you and your dad back in the day, and how your dad tried to tell you some things when you were a teenager that you didn't really want to hear. And maybe the way that he tried to tell you those things or explain those things to you wasn't great, right? He could have done that much better. And
Absolutely.
also maybe some of the ways that you responded in hindsight, you would have done differently, right? So again, it's coming at this from either side. We both need to be aware of how we're coming across and what kind of attitude we're bringing to it.
Yeah, well, my dad's been gone almost 40 years now. And when I was a young guy, I cringed to say this, especially in front of my son. But I told him to F off when I was about 18. I didn't need his money. I didn't need his advice. I didn't need his, whatever. I wasn't very nice about it. And if I could go back and do it again, I have two things. He did not present it very well to me. Him and I were very alike. And sometimes at a young guy, me, doesn't take good advice. His advice turned out later. I look back and go, what he was trying to do was great. How he did it, And I wasn't mature enough to take and parse out, here's what he's trying to help me with, and the way he said it to me. And I was kind of just, young guys sometimes, I don't know, maybe it didn't have anybody else, but I really wasn't Mr. Oh, sure, Dad, I'll be happy to, based on our history at that point. So that's the same thing that happens in groups sometimes, where two people are actually very alike. And a lot of times they're not very far apart, but they're arguing as if they're mortal enemies here. Not really real helpful in this business.
Yeah. And obviously it can sound a little self-interested coming from, people that benefit from people paying for coaching, right? Or buying training courses. So we'll acknowledge that up front. But although this poster is certainly technically correct that all that matters in the end is the results and whether you can earn a living at this or not. But I also think it's fair to say that getting the right training, not just any training or coaching, but the right training, studying with the right people, listening to the right mentors, can help you get to that goal of making a really good living in this a lot faster with a lot fewer pitfalls and time wasted on dead ends.
Oh, yeah. Well, so anybody can do it all by themselves. It's been proven over and over again. You have a whole set of people. Justin Bieber became a pop music sensation going on YouTube. And I'm going to guess that there's 10,000 other kids that were probably as talented as him that didn't make it. Okay. So, if you play, you could say, yes, he made it. We all could make it, maybe. But that path that he took is not a path that most of us will succeed on if we go down that. So the people that are more experienced, it is a problem for somebody like me because I do coach. I do have paid things. People pay me to coach. So I do work hard to minimize the, do it my way because I'm a coach type thing. And instead figure out what would be in the best interest of the person that I'm talking with. You also get this whole other thing where it's like, sometimes I bite my tongue. Many of us who have been coaching a while, rather than just say what we think, we do sugarcoat it. We dance around it. I saw Johnny Heller was one conversation, and his first thing was, hey, I agree with the spirit of what you're saying. But then he laid out about 7 other points, kind of going the other way about. And so, point being, he did a perfect job of acknowledging, I see your point of view. I think that that's valid. And then here's some other things you might want to consider, because he certainly could have been accused of being one of those guys that says, well, okay, hey, I've watched this happen for 10, 15 years, and here's what I recommend, and that makes no sense. He could have been like rude about it practically and still been right, but he was not. He was a total gentleman about it, and he acknowledged the points. And it was kind of a perfectly balanced answer from somebody with a lot of experience. I have to admit, unfortunately, some of us with more experience don't always follow that model as well as we could. So if you're newer and you see somebody who's been around a while who gives advice that's pretty targeted, one of two things. They're not necessarily great on social media in terms of how they write and express themselves, or they're just out of time. There are points where I have to admit, every once in a while, I'm like, hey, do this, this, and this. Call me in 3 weeks, call me in 2 months, and you'll understand exactly why I said that. But that it's just dumb. I'm better off staying out of the conversation than doing that.
Yeah, well, I think like a lot of older, more experienced people in this business, you're trying to be helpful, and similar to parenting, sometimes that doesn't come across immediately, and sometimes the other person isn't quite ready to hear it either. So, but yep. the intention is always good. So, I think that's enough for this topic today. Hopefully, that was helpful to you. And of course, as always, if you're looking for a ready-made system, processing stack, perhaps that can increase your audio quality and cut your production time. Well, we have those things over at VOJumpstart.com. You can schedule a free 15-minute session with Don to talk about your unique audio needs or a situation or your current setup. We'd be happy to do that for you. Again, VOJumpstart.com. For Don Barnes, I'm Donnie Barnes. This has been the Audio Barnyard Podcast. We'll talk to you next time.
And see you on the wires. Bye-bye.
We don't get paid to punch and roll or to use a clicker. We don't get paid for our number of coachings or the coaches we've worked with. That's all right. That's all right.
I don't know why.
That's all right. I could have started that better anyway, so gives us an excuse to start over.
All right, we're not going to. Oh, man. That just choked me up. That was so emotional, that
I know. I get that a lot.
That was my song.
I get that a lot.
Yeah. We're rolling, and we're going to do that, and whoopee, and when you're ready, go ahead. Sorry.